to the Immersive Design Podcast. This is your host, Brian McGowan. Today we're going to be talking to veteran show writer Stacy Barton. Let's get right into it. So today we have Stacy Barton on. She's a veteran show writer, worked with the Walt Disney Company, SeaWorld, among many others. She wrote The Family Who Saved Christmas, Club Evil, Hoist a Sail with Jack Sparrow, and a bunch of other ones that you can find on her LinkedIn. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So first thing I like to ask people is, what do you define as the immersive design field?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. To be honest, there's so much incredible stuff happening now, more than ever. My firsthand experience with the immersive world is really creating theatrical worlds from Disney films that we create an environment in which the audience can step inside it, kind of like an attraction on steroids. We take over ballroom spaces. I'm not sure if I know exactly how I would define immersive, except that it's really taking the concept of themed entertainment kind of all the way to the edge, creating the senses, the ability to interact with the story in real time, in a space that gives the audience more agency than perhaps being in a ride vehicle would give you. I certainly have enjoyed the ability to create the environments that allow the guests to really be the stars. I think that's what Walt intended in some ways when he created the first theme parks, and of course, so many people have built upon that idea to create a world in which you can step inside it. And to me, that's just exciting. And the more real that becomes, the more fun I think the audience can have.
So, you were saying that, the best part about it is building these worlds and how you contribute to that. So what exactly does a show writer do to bring those worlds to life?
Right. Well, I can tell you what I've done. I don't know that it's the same for all show writers. I just have my experience. But in the immersive experiences that I've been a part of those have all really only been at Disney, I think. I'd have to think about it for a minute. But in those situations, we take over a ballroom and create the scene, for instance, Alice in Wonderland, and create the world of the Wacky Wonderland. And as the show writer in that situation, I work closely with the director and the producer as well to kind of define what piece of that IP, what piece of that story, or usually it's a film for us, what piece of that are we going to make come to life? Because you can't really make the entire film come to life. So as the writer, I work really closely with that to decide what's the best entrance point for the audience. What is the best nugget of that world that will give us an experience that can really be rich, and that the audience can really have agency inside. So, for instance, with Alice in Wonderland, the place we chose was the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It's probably pretty obvious. We were able to create a way that they got into the Wonderland and a way that they left. And then while they were there, we had this 40-foot tea table built for us in China that had teapots that actually whistled and steamed, and the dormouse popped in and out of several of the pots at different times. And the family sat at the table, and the Mad Hatter at one end, the March Hare at the other, and then the different characters that you would expect to see appeared. And there was a stage around the table that the performers would come out, and we had an a cappella group, we had dancers, we had dancing playing cards, and then at the end the Queen of Hearts came out and put Alice on trial and decided to take her head off, of course, and that led us into the Off With Your Head ball, and it became a top 40 dance party. So in all of that kind of creation, I'm there along the way deciding what bits we keep, what bits we don't need, what makes for the best arc in this 1-2 hour experience. And then, of course, any scripting that needs to happen. In a situation like that, it's largely improvisational. So the scripting is a lot of the language that those characters would use, and then ancillary characters that allow us to talk to the family, because, of course, the characters can't leave their storyline. So any scripting of that sort falls to me. But probably the biggest thing I do in an immersive experience is write the narrative, the treatment that is what all the different disciplines are going to follow. And so I always say if I've done my job well, there's less and less language. So it starts out with lots of writing, lots of storytelling about where we're going and why we're going there and what it looks like and feels like and tastes like and smells like. And then the different disciplines go off and running, and as they build and do their own storytelling with their discipline, then the narrative treatment can get smaller, and then we go to script, and that's kind of how it works. I don't know if that made sense for you.
It definitely does, because I think that a lot of people, when they hear show writer, they would assume script writer.
Right.
And that's, one small part of it, but it's not the entire thing. How do you kind of focus in on what lines you want to use from the film, let's say, or the book versus, original lines that you're going to put into this performance?
It depends on where I'm working, but in the world of Disney, there's some very strict guidelines for what the characters can do and say. Alice in Wonderland is an easier one because it would be fine for Alice to go, "Oh, hello, who are you?" But you wouldn't have this same scenario if it was, some of the other stories. But basically, it's more about choosing what will be an effective experience for the audience, and then supplementing that with, or not supplementing, supporting that with what's in the environment, what the performers do and say. So the audience is really, for me, the guiding factor. So rather than thinking about what I would love to write or what I think would be cool to say or what I want to see on stage, I really come at it from the other side, from the audience side, and what would they want? What would they be engaged in? And that really comes from I didn't start as a writer. I started as a performer and audience participatory, improvisational street theater performer. And in those shows, if the audience didn't like what you presented, they just walked away. So I learned very early that the audience is who I work for.
Well, I think that that's something that is so obvious and so easy to forget when you're, a designer, is the whole point of creating this is for the guest. A lot of the conversations I had with people, they want to create the coolest attraction, the most exhilarating attraction, or, fear-inducing attraction, but they don't really get what would be cool for me, as opposed to thinking, what would the family that's going to go through this, what does dad think? What does the son think? What does mom think? How do you draw on each one of their perspectives to, give each one of them an enjoyable experience and something that's memorable?
Yes. And I think everyone has the intent to do it for the guest, but as the storyteller, story driver, perhaps you could say, I find myself asking those questions and gearing, what I write based on that. And there is a difference, I think. I think you're right. It is obvious, and it is also hard to always remember. But I have found that my role as a writer, I don't know if that's the role of the writer or how Stacy handles the roles she's in, but I find that I'm constantly double checking, how is the audience being affected? How is that going to work? When you get into the creation of things, especially if you're doing a build, you want to do the cool technology. You want to have the amazing moments, and there's that's all needed. And I think in the scope of that, what I find myself sometimes saying is, that's an amazing technology, but it doesn't suit this particular iteration of this particular story. Or maybe we should use that technology in this other spot rather than that spot. Or maybe that technology works on this other story we're working on over here in the other room. So just to remember that the technology, any of the parts, the set, the music, the costumes, all of it serves the story, and the story serves the audience. And with that kind of reminder, then we can be as absolutely fabulous as we can be with all of the all of the amazing creativity that's out there. And the designers are just tremendous.
How do you kind of get down to what the kernel of the story is? Like, I think that it's kind of interesting, let's say with, Alice in Wonderland, there's quite a few different themes you could go with, whether it's curiosity or, just having fun with the absurd, or, maturing and kind of becoming an adult, towards the end of it. How do you pick, which theme is a driving force in the story that you're telling?
Right. Well, that does depend on the audience. And in the particular conversation that we're in at the moment, talking about doing these immersive experiences where we take over the ballrooms, we have particular audiences that we're doing that for. But there is a general understanding, do you have a family audience? Do you have an after hours club audience? So like the audience for this Alice in Wonderland event that we did is different than the Club Evil event that we did, where that was, about the Disney divas of evil and the kind of nightclub they would have if they all joined forces. So starting again with the audience, and then, for Alice in Wonderland, the simple reality was that we were going to have adults and children, grandparents and teenagers. And so who doesn't love to enter this sort of wacky world? And so it was the topsy-turvy Tea Party type feel that we were going for, and all the music and the characters and the food that was presented between the show elements was all themed. And in fact, they actually got white chocolate roses that they painted red with liquid red icing. So the food even becomes a part of it. So really in that one, it was about the topsy-turvy nature. And I guess that really was chosen in part at the beginning when we decided that the best place to stop and play for a while was at the Tea Party. Mm-hmm. So then from that is then born what do they see while they're there, and how do you get them in and how do you get them out?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the best one to go with. If you're going to be a dance party, you want it to be fun throughout and, exhilarating, and having much of silliness, will get you a little bit amped up and want to dance. So I think that makes sense. Other ones I'm sure are a lot more difficult.
Yes. The dance at the end was for one of the iterations of this that had an older demographic. So they played in the topsy-turvy world as adults being kids again. And so between their courses were fancy cocktails. And so that's the one that ended in the dance party. The one we did with the families, actually, I don't think we did end with the dance party, if my memory serves me.
Do you think that changes what comes before it? If you're building to a dance party, do you have to add a crescendo in the one, that doesn't have a dance party so that you leave on a high note? Did that change at all?
Yeah, I think the one we did for the family, there was an actual birthday involved. And so the playfulness and the wacky world and the tea party, the unbirthday tea party, did eventually turn into a birthday moment and for a child. And so that was the kind of the climax. One of the other fun parts of that was we were actually able to create the doorknob as a character. So it was actually a puppet with an actor who worked the puppet, who could see through videography the family and could actually interact comedically in real time with the family as the doorknob. And that kind of helped us in and out of different scenes with the family, a particular event.
One thing that you mentioned when you were a performer, how did that, benefit you when you're a show writer now? Of course, you have the experience of seeing how people react to show writing, but, how else in maybe not as intuitive of ways?
I always say there's in that relationship with the audience to really honor and respect it. And when you're doing street theater, people don't have to stay, they can just walk away. And so I learned early on that I am really nothing without the audience. And I think the pandemic has shown us that, and reminded us of that in potentially a really beautiful way, because if there's no audience, there's no show. And so it doesn't really matter how fabulous we are, how great our message, or how amazing our skill. If there's no audience there, it's just, we're just listening to ourselves talk. And so I think that factors deeply in how I operate. And we've touched on that some already, but I do always say there's 3 questions that I like to ask on any project. It doesn't even have to be an immersive one. It could be a stage show or a fireworks show or a parade. But it's, what's the promise that you're offering the audience? What emotional promise? What story promise? How are you going to deliver that promise? And that's where you touch into, are we going to do a parade or a show or a fireworks display? And then the third question is, what does the audience take away emotionally? What do they leave with? What feeling do they leave with? What do they feel empowered? Do they feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel a tenderness for their family? Are they hopeful for the future? But if you ask those 3 questions as you go, that helps you stay connected to the audience and mindful and intentional about what you're giving them. What are you promising them? How are you going to give that to them? And then what ultimately do they leave with? And sometimes there's a bit of merchandise perhaps that they can leave with, not in a way of trying to get more money out of people, but because people, and especially children, but not only children, they love to have a tangible piece that reminds them of the memory of the experience. So I think that audience-centric nature that really grew from my work as a street theater performer still informs the way I approach a show. And we need all the different disciplines and the different perspectives at the table. That's what makes themed entertainment so magical, is you have a diversity of thought around the table when creating anything. And there are things that other people look at that I don't think of. And so I think that's what makes it so magical.
So one thing, I thought was kind of interesting, your second question of how do you deliver this? How much input, I guess, would the show writer have on that? Like, let's say, you said the best way to deliver this message is through a fireworks display. But, that's not in the budget. We can only have, X amount of dollars, then, that would blow our budget. So would you have to rewrite the show for that? Or, I guess it, might, depend on which company you're working for at the time. But how do you advocate to get your vision to be executed?
Right. And that is often determined, like what it's going to be, but often there will be a large brainstorm to say, how should we use this new IP? And so I would just be one of the people in the room, determining that. At other times you'll be given, we need a fireworks show, and we want you to make it about this. And then sometimes as you said, the scope might change, or the leadership might change, and they'll say, no, we decided we're not going to do that in the fireworks. We're going to do that in the parade. So my role as a writer, even though I do ask those questions, is often to make them make sense when those changes come to me as the writer. So I may not be able to say, I really think this would make a better parade than a fireworks show. But when given if I'm given what I have to do, then the second question is already answered for me. So we're going to deliver it in a parade. So that may be the question that's answered when I begin. But then how are we going to deliver the emotional experience through the vehicle of the parade, or through the vehicle of the fireworks? So there's a secondary question there of how are you going to create that emotional experience? So for instance, I was on a project, the cast service celebration, which is the celebration that honors cast members who've got, 25, 35, 45 years of service. And we were creating the fireworks show. Well, that was already determined as one of the elements. So I didn't get to choose that, but I had to choose how we were going to make that audience feel. And so the promise in that situation was that we were going to take them down memory lane and remember not only different moments in their career and what shows were happening at Disney, but what was happening at home. And when that movie came out, that's when we had our second kid, or when that attraction opened, that's when we had our 20th wedding anniversary. So the promise there was that we would make them feel as if or we would remind them that they had been a part of Disney all this time. And so then the answer to the second one, how to deliver that, became in what language did we choose to use? What music did we choose to use? What order did we put that experience in, so that when we got to the end, they would take away this deep sense of belonging and accomplishment for their celebration about their longevity with the company.
And I think one thing that, you touch on quite a bit is, the emotion of that. Like I was saying earlier, I think that a lot of people try to go for more of the exhilarating emotions, and you seem to be more of the empathic emotions. Does Disney go after the writer for what their specialty is, or do you have to conform to the project?
Oh, I change based on every project. Sometimes it's just easier to explain what I'm talking about if I use something that is a little bit more sentimental. But certainly when you want to give someone a thrill, that's exactly the same formula. You have to think, what's the order of that, right? You have to build up the surprise, or you have in a haunted house situation, there's a rhythm of how long you go before there's another shock. So you're still thinking about the audience. What's your promise? Your promise is that you're going to surprise them and scare them, and make them have that rush that you feel when you are frightened. And there's a definite formula and a rhythm to that, and you have to continually be mindful, so that if you've got this new technology or set piece or whatever that you think is going to make this most amazing scare that you've kind of alluded to all the while, that you want to place that at the right spot of that haunted event, attraction, haunted house, or whatever. So the principles still apply with other emotions that are not sentimental. If you take the Marvel or Star Wars, those kinds of things, you have that great sense of heroic capabilities and empowerment and feelings of victory and defeating the evil foe, and all those emotions they're fabulous to work with too. And then I'm thinking, in the Harry Potter realm, it's magic, but it's also really self-empowerment, stepping into your own power and feelings like that are really rich and dramatic. And those are really important to make sure, in the same way, what are you promising and how are you going to give it to them, and what are they going to walk away with? I think that it's not just for sentimental situations. You have to be able to adapt to whatever the audience is and whatever the story is, or the intellectual property. And it does change. It changes the how you bring them in, where the entrance point is again for the audience, and how you give them agency in it.
An excellent example in Harry Potter, and several other attractions, but putting the guest in the forefront. One of their biggest things that you do is going into Ollivander's wand shop, and the wand chooses you, and it's like you're meant to be here, and this story is about you. I think putting the guest, not only their experience in the forefront, but like the land reacting to them, can definitely be an empowering experience.
Oh, it's incredible. It's beautiful. I mean, it's just that is a tremendous example of what I'm talking about. And I think that, themed entertainment, the whole premise behind it is that the audience steps into the show, right? That's the premise behind, all of those attractions and lands and theme parks, cruise ships. But I think that we're entering a new realm with the explosion of immersive experiences outside of theme parks, and the amazing strides that those groups are making, and pushing the envelope to say, well, maybe it's not just that they get to walk around in there. Maybe they get to be a wizard who has a wand, choose them, or maybe they get to be, a superhero. And I think those experiences really showcase how powerful it is. And, when I worked in those street theater shows all those years ago, we told stock stories, like Romeo and Juliet, and we would pick Romeo and Juliet out of the audience. And we always picked grandparents that age because they have nothing to fear, nothing to lose, and they're willing to play so delightfully. But then they became the star of the show. So we didn't just let them up there, and we didn't use them to make fun of them, to make ourselves look good. We really elevated them to the status of star and allowed them to alter what happened on the stage. And what happens when you do that is that those two people, then the entire audience now is themselves, they feel themselves in those two people that are up starring in the show, and they get the experience as well. And I think with all of the video gamers that we have now in the audiences, and the generation of young people with children now are used to social media and starring in their own story. I think that as designers and writers and artists in the themed entertainment realm, I think we have to step it up a notch and make the interactivity even more special.
How do you think that, maybe in 5-10 years, what will storytelling look like in the theme parks? Of course, that's very hard to predict, but, with the trends, how they are, do you see any difference on how they tell stories now versus how they will?
Well, that's always a hard one to know, because you think at the moment what's going to happen later, and then we look back and laugh at that. But I think at the moment, something simple like queues, like waiting for an attraction. I think that in my mind, it would be lovely if there would be some way to include people's cell phones, and create communities with some sort of elevated app where the story begins before you even get there. And maybe you're put in a group of 20 people, and your mission is slightly different. Or your moment to begin is different. And maybe there's something that happens throughout that connects those people. I just think the way to connect people with, everybody's got these little computers in their pockets and screens and augmented reality, and just there's so much there that I think the way we connect guests to each other and the way we connect them to the story is something that I think might develop in a different way in the future, and potentially change how people go in. We've spent an awful lot of time on attractions and rides, and perhaps there will be something that's more of a walk-through attraction that allows for more interactivity. I think we've gone from high touch to high tech, and I hope that we go back to a little bit more of high touch, where you have more live entertainers inside an experience, kind of like Ollivanders, where you have that that human connection alongside tremendous technology. I don't know where it will go, but I do think that remembering that the audience wants more and more agency in the experience based on what they're used to at home, I think that we would be wise to at least pay attention to that and consider that as we move forward as an industry.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's something that you're seeing a little bit more. Of course, this is a large budget attraction of Rise of Resistance, but, for example, after you get captured, the First Order is talking to you and interrogating you and being a little bit, mean, but not in like in a intimidating way, but, kind of giving you a little bit of uneasy vibes. And I think that that might be, something that people kind of go more towards, is expecting the audience to play along and kind of, forcing them to come out of their shell, as opposed to a lot of the older attractions. The queue is just something that you're observing, and, you go onto the ride, and that, again, is something you observe, and then you go off and discuss it. I think that, that could definitely be a huge component, is the interacting and being able to touch things, and using technology more in ways of that it's behind the scenes, as opposed to showing people, look at this technology, isn't that cool?
Right. Well, and I think, again, you have that promise. If you set the promise to the audience that they will matter, that they will make a difference, that they're going to be asked to participate, that's a promise you set early, and then you better come through and deliver it. And then the audience will leave feeling as though they got what they had been promised, like in the situation you just described.
So I just have one last question for us. The most common question, I'm sure you get it quite often. How do I get into this field? And of course, that's basically an impossible question to answer, in a abbreviated amount of time. But, what resources do you think would be the most useful to someone that's trying to get into this field?
So there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. And one of them is, if you're looking particularly at show writing, at least in my experience, there is a huge amount of writing that's narrative treatment, that's storytelling, that's describing the experience of the audience from start to finish. And the script writing is a small part of my writing hours. So I would say that any new writers out there, to be able to work in that field, go to smaller companies perhaps, or be involved in the event world where the narrative treatment and then the script are required. That's a way to get your foot in the door and to be useful. And I always say, listen really well when you have the chance to work somewhere. Maybe you volunteer at a huge haunted house event in your hometown, and you write the narrative treatment for everybody who's working on it, and then maybe you write some of the language. But however you get into those gigs, make sure that you listen carefully, and then you deliver what you're asked, deliver it better than they asked for it, and a little sooner, and a little more than they had hoped. So that's just kind of in general way of approaching getting work. I'm a 20-year contractor. I've never been full-time anywhere. And that's, I think, how I've been able to work in so many places, because once they use me, I'm easy to work with. I don't hold my words as priceless. They're just one of the tools that the whole team is using. So I think you have to be willing to be incredibly collaborative. I think you have to be willing to take extreme direction, like we don't like that at all, start over, or we changed our mind and we're doing something totally different. And you have to be able to go with that flow and adjust your spirit and your attitude and jump in and do it again. And, in the same way that there's, people say as an actor, your job is auditioning and every now and then you get a gig. That's really the role of a writer in themed entertainment because it's so collaborative. If you want to write your own story and see it through to the end, you should be a screenwriter or a playwright or a novelist. But to expect collaborative situations and that rewriting is your job rather than writing, I think those are some really important things to know heading into the space of being a show writer and themed entertainment. And then I think I'm sure there are lots of resources, but the one that I do know of is the Themed Entertainment Creative Workshop series. And they have, I did a masterclass for them. I think you were there last Friday, and it was just great. It was hugely successful. There were, I think, 90 people there. But they also have like workshops where you can be in a workshop, and I do know they have a writing track for that. And so I would say look for places like that and other workshops where you can be around people that are doing the same thing. You can be mentored. Reach out to other show writers. I know LinkedIn isn't one of the most popular social media platforms for young professionals, but it's a really good one for themed entertainment. And I would say reach out to writers you that look interesting to you, or reach out to writers who are working on an IP that you admire and ask for a meet and greet. Ask them questions. And internships is another amazing way, maybe an unpaid internship. I know that internships are difficult right now because of the pandemic, but they will return. And I just say, look for where you can actually do the work and get some of that on your resume so that you can go to a place that if you have a dream of working at Universal or Disney or SeaWorld or wherever, you can show that you've actually done some work in that field. Those would be some of the things that I would encourage.
What, I guess, when you're first starting off, people want to see your portfolio. Do you think that it'd be better to have a variety of work, or would it be better to have, many of the same thing to kind of give people a perspective on what you enjoy? For example, would it be better to have a script, a treatment and a poem, or would it be better to have, 10 scripts?
I am not sure I have a very educated advice on that. I do think that one thing that is a strength of mine, but can also be a weakness, is that I have done such a wide variety. And so sometimes it is hard for someone to know what project to bring me in on. So I have combated that by saying I'm the Swiss Army knife of storytellers. Mm-hmm. But I think if you have a singular passion, if you are, a Star Wars buff or a Marvel buff, or a Mickey buff or Harry Potter, I think there can be some value in that. I would say my personality is I go where the yes is. So if I've found places where I can do my work and there's been a variety of work, then that's kind of become my MO. And if you're someone who really only likes superheroes, then just find all the places and the people that want help with superheroes and then just go for that. I don't know that there's a right or wrong, but I think that whatever you have done or whatever you have access to, take it and then use it to your advantage when you want to get the next thing.
Well, I think that's, good advice is basically, put yourself on the page and, hopefully that's someone that they want to work with. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you online?
LinkedIn for sure. Right now, I'm pretty active on there. I'm actively looking for new gigs and projects. The pandemic has, pushed me back on my keister like everybody else. So I'm pretty active on there right now. So definitely reach out to me, connect with me, private message me. Maybe we can chat, follow my posts. And I may be doing some more master classes. I'm working on that right now. So stay in touch with me, and there might be some educational opportunities, workshops, fun ones. I'm not very academic, but fun ones that will be coming up. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you can find that. I am also on Instagram, but I find that I don't spend as much time there, but it's Stacy Barton Show Writer on Instagram. But LinkedIn, I think, is probably the best place to find me professionally.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. And it was fun to talk to you, and I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Immersive Design Podcast. I've been your host, Brian McGowan. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation with show writer Stacy Barton. If you want to chat more about the immersive design field, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. We'll see you again soon.